Hello and welcome to One on One. I am Cyril Stober. My guest today superintends over critical sectors of the national economy. He's a lawyer, a senior advocate of Nigeria, a rank he was conferred with in 2004. Now for 8 years, that's 2 terms, he was governor of Lagos State. That's from 2007 to 2015. A recipient of numerous awards, one of them the Stephen Solars Award of the International Crisis Group for 2015 for commitment to building a peaceful and vibrant society, and his work in improving social and economic conditions in Lagos. In November 2015, he was named in President Buhari's cabinet as Minister of Power, Works and Housing. Let's welcome Mr. Babatunde Raji Fashola. Thanks for being here, Minister.
Thanks for having me. A pleasure to be with you.
Power, works and housing. These are huge sectors, massive, massive. Did your heart skip a beat or two when you were allotted this portfolio, seeing the huge deficit in these areas?
I think that if you go back to the file photo of that moment, I think my expression will tell you how I felt. But that is all behind us now, and work has started. We have momentum, and we're optimistic that we can deliver a very huge dent to the challenges that have stood in the way of Nigeria's development.
When Nigerians talk about your ministry, Power, Works and Housing, sometimes it's a bit difficult to decide where to start off from. Is it power matter? Is it works, talking about roads, infrastructure, things like that? Is it the housing deficit that we face? But let's begin with power, because it's said that without that we cannot get to this industrialized state we also desire. We have heard all kinds of figures bandied around. One day we're told we're doing 6,000 megawatts, someday we're told it's 7,000, at other times we know it's 5,000. What are we generating today?
What we are able to generate, and I think the nomenclature and the discussion must be informed. The capacity of generating sets and power plants that are ready to put power onto the grid today is 7,000 megawatt, plus or minus 50, 100 here and there, depending, and that continues to increase. The capacity to evacuate the power and transmit the power also has grown to about 6,900 the last time I checked. But what we are able to put onto the grid has varied in the last month between 4,900 to 4,400. This is the capacity that exists at the distribution level to take power to the last mile. Now, don't forget that this time last year, the discos were complaining that they did not have enough power to sell, and that was true, because then we had the crisis in the Delta, and there was really no gas to power the generating sets. That is now behind us, and with the programs and policies that have followed the achievement of stability and peace, the hydros are firing more. We are able to supply enough to meet the capacity that the discos can distribute, but there is now additional capacity. So what needs to happen in the next 3 to 6 or so months is how we get the discos to ramp up capacity to take all of the power that is available.
Well, in easy terms, it is that what's available is they can't take all what's available.
Yeah,
but we have always heard the companies themselves say, no, this is not exactly the situation. That truth of the matter is that they can't get what they desire.
I said that was in the past when there wasn't this much power to sell. The story has changed today. In fact, as we speak, we're working with the discos now to find out the areas where they need to quickly expand, build distribution substations, install more transformers, roll out more conductors and lines to take the power that is available and to ensure also that those areas are areas where they can effectively build, meter and collect, because the power needs to be proven. So the story has changed. But let me be very, very clear. This is not a blame game. It is demonstrative of a couple of things, one of which is that this administration can solve problems. That's what it demonstrates. The power generation problem that was not enough is increasing. It is not yet enough. The power transmission that used to be the black sheep in the value chain has changed its game. It is producing, it is transporting more. So it just means that one part of the value chain also needs to change. So those who deliver A and B clearly have demonstrated capacity to do something, and the same capacity will become manifest in C. As we go on, these things will play out. It may well be that in the next 12 months, it is distribution that will run slightly ahead of transmission and generation. Because while it takes a relatively shorter time to build distribution assets, it takes anything from 12 to 24 months to build new power plants. So what we are also doing simultaneously now is to ensure that our transmission investment is targeted at oncoming power generation, so that the story you used to hear before was that power was constrained by transmission. They couldn't transmit it. We're solving those bottlenecks. That's one of the projects we went to commission in Ikot Ekpene. That's one of the projects we've done in Mayo Belwa, in Adamawa. One of the projects we've done in Sokoto. Work is going on in this area. So we're now targeting our work. And as we go on, everything will plateau and there will be more coordination so that nobody leaves anybody behind. These are challenges of transition.
Well, people talk about these challenges of transition you talk about, but they take the blame, far earlier and say perhaps the whole idea of the privatization was not really well thought out in the first place. Or there was too much of a hurry, and everyone believed this was at a time when it was felt privatization was it, and once you privatize it, bang, everything becomes utopia. But they're saying now that even with privatization, there are no guarantees for efficiency of service.
Well, I think the point to make first is that personally and historically, privatization has worked for Nigeria. Personally, I think that is the way to go as well. And where would we be, for example? I am on NTA, and before this industry was privatized, this was easily the only station to watch, and it closed after the 9 o'clock news. Now, privatization has brought on competition. NTA also has to compete, and we have many more channels. The same thing has happened in the print industry. We have seen the same thing in the banking industry. We have seen it in the telecoms industry. So this is one of the latest beneficiaries of the policy. And hopefully, and in my view, very clearly, certainly, the benefits will come through. The benefits are beginning to already manifest. Is perhaps the expectation that needs to be properly managed. People are investing more to produce power than we had the capacity to do 5, 6, 7 years ago. People are investing in maintenance that we had the capacity to do many years ago. Let me give you an example. Jabba hydropower plant was commissioned in 1986. There was no turnaround maintenance, which should have happened every 6 years until 2013, 2014, when it was taken over under concession. Egmi had 6 turbines when it was built in, I think, 1985. The turbines had run down, except 2 were working out of 6. Now, all the 6 have been rehabilitated with private capital. So it is not correct to say that it is not bringing any benefit. Is it giving us the results we want immediately? Certainly not. And that is part of the problem that you identified. I mean, what people were made to believe at the time. People were made to believe that privatization was a silver bullet. On the day that the contracts were signed, everything was going to be huru. I was a voice of restraint and caution at the time that people need to be told that there was a lot of work to be done, there was a lot of investment to be made, there was customer enumeration to be done. The industry was privatized on a customer base of 6.57 million households in the whole of the country. That is clearly not correct. So distribution companies don't know all their customers. People are stealing energy. They don't know where they are stealing them from, and so on and so forth. That's work that still needs to be done as we produce more power, transmit more power, and distribute more power. Finally, on privatization, let me make the point. We compare privatization that has happened in Europe and the West to the privatization that took place here. In many of those instances, I recall that British Gas was a functioning going concern, British Rail was a functioning going concern, British Telecoms and all of those assets were functioning service delivering concerns when government sold them. Now, that is different from a power system that was not producing and that needed a lot of investments to bring it to speed. And that investments will come. We are seeing investors like Azura come to the play. They will soon commission their power plant sometime in May next year to add 450 megawatt. The operators of the Okpai power plant and the Akwa Ibom power plant are already reaching advanced stages of closure to double their capacities. Each of them is producing, I think, 400, 450 megawatts on their existing plant. They want to replicate what they are doing. So those are signs of investment coming. And we just need to then, manage the expectation, redefine the realities, explain to our people that there is still work to do.
Sometimes the discourse complain that the industry is over-regulated, and they say this is one of the challenges they have to face with. They are faced with. Do you think the industry is over-regulated?
Well, my answer to the question will be that this is a regulated industry. It is a regulated industry, and it is regulated because there have to be rules for everybody to play. Most of the equipment used, for example, are technical equipment. They have codes. They have frequency regulations at which they must deliver power. There are safety issues concerned, and therefore you cannot complain about overregulation. If you know anything about electricity business, you will know that there are so many rules about quality of conductor, quality of material, where you can use aluminum, where you can use copper, where you cannot mix, and so on and so forth. And that life can become defining if you break those regulations. And therefore, it is an industry that needs to be regulated. The quality of meters, the quantity, the type of metering, because we all consume energy, for example, differently. Some people use only television sets, power bulbs in their homes. Some people use air conditioning, others don't. Some people use cooking ovens, electric ovens to cook. Some people use power for industrial, semi-industrial purposes. So our consumption and classifications are also different. Therefore, our metering will be different. And therefore, regulations must govern how everybody is metered and what everybody pays. So I don't think anybody who knows this business, who comes into this business with that knowledge, can fairly complain that this is an overregulated industry, because regulations help to define the rules of the. It's like going to play football and say it's overregulated. One of the rules is that you can't tackle from behind. So you can't go in there and say, oh, because it's overregulated, then it is that. Get out of it and go and play something else.
Anyhow, these also contribute to the costs of investment, which some of the companies who took over what was unbundled claim is giving them some constraints. Matter of fact, the government has a number of times come to them, and Nigerians are saying, If you privatized, if you sold companies and people bought them, they ought to have known what they were putting their money into. How turn around and say, look, we don't have the resources to invest in shoring up this industry and turn back to the same government?
You see, it's interesting you take this point. One of the setbacks or problems that the privatization has thrown up is a liquidity problem. And these were inherited issues that we have to deal with. Some of the material that I've seen suggests that also some of the people who bought the assets then had the option to borrow and finance in Naira or to borrow and finance in dollars. What turns out was that because the interest rate for dollar loans were cheaper, they took the dollar loans. And of course, as it turned out, without any fault attributable to them, the economy hit a difficult storm. Our rates devalued. It meant then that their repayment, which was contracted at the time at about 165 naira to $1, they now had to find double that amount. Essentially, the assets they held became devalued. That's not their fault. But beyond that, those were economic risks that they took, because they probably would have been better off today had they taken a Naira loan with a higher interest rate. And those are the risks. But that said, government, you see, the cost of not having power is much more difficult to quantify than whatever interventions and support government puts. What has government done? Government has given an electricity management support fund through central bank at less than the commercial rate. That's what government has done. So in that sense, it's like government is subsidizing. That's not unusual. That's the role of government, to enable private sector. They are doing the same thing with agric. And if electricity is so defined and we are serious about it, that's what we must do. Government has bailed out banks in this country. And the American government has bailed out private firms, automobiles, banks, in order to keep the whole of its economy going. So those are decisions that we must see in the larger picture than in the narrow picture. If we truly say that electricity is important, as it is, we must stop whining, and I beg the pardon of those who may be offended by that, to say, look, is the intervention or support accountable? Right. Is it a subsidy that we can track? And to the extent that it comes by a loan that comes at a reduced market cost, a below market cost, it's sensible. Secondly, and most importantly, people must continuously remember that government owns 40% of those discos. They hold that 40% in trust for the federal government, for the state government, for the local governments, and for the employees of the power sector. So if you see a business in which you hold almost half not doing well, and you are in a place to prop it up so that it can do better, who benefits when it does better? Because you have a 40% benefit when it does well, or a 40% loss when it doesn't do well.
All right, well, Minister, a lot of all this would be classified sometimes as highly technical, complex, and what the Nigerian citizen is out looking for is to walk in, turn on that switch, and there is light, there's power, to power his small business, his home, and to do all the things that are dependent on power, and of course even the large industries. And so the basic question would be, when and what is this administration doing to bring that to reality?
What we are doing to bring that to reality is a faithful implementation of our roadmap. Our roadmap first targets incremental power, simply because we all acknowledge that the power we have is not enough for our size and for our needs. And where the power exists, not everybody can connect to it. So we're working on incremental power. And from what you have heard, the amount of power on the grid on May 29, 2015, when this administration was inaugurated, was 2,690 megawatt. the amount of power on the grid today is averaging 4,008, 4,009. The amount of power we have increased and able to produce is now at 7. So in that sense, we are on the right path. How quickly we will get more power, I can tell you that between the next 3 to 12 months, we will get power 450 megawatt extra from Azura in Edo, 240 megawatt extra coming from AFAM in Port Harcourt, 115 megawatt extra coming from Bayelsa Bahrain, 10 megawatt from Katsina, 40 megawatt from Kashimbila in Taraba around July. If we finish Gurara sometime in the middle of 2018, it will add another 30 megawatt. Then Dadinkowa, the hydro power plant in Gombe, should give us another 29 megawatt. So between the next 3 to 12 months, these are power plants that I am optimistic that we will complete, switch on, and add to the grid. There are others that are being developed by private companies and so on and so forth coming on. The Niger Delta Power Holding Company, which is another company undertaking the NIPP project, which I superintend, is also working in various places across the country: Onitsha, Ihiala, Kija, Omotosho, Olorunshogo, and many of those projects will be completed within the next 30 days to 90 days. So from around Christmas, you will see I will be a little, again, busy going around. There are transmission substations also being completed by TCN that we're going to be switching on, expanding substations, essentially bringing power closer to people. So it's a roadmap that we have developed. The second stage of that roadmap is getting steady power. And steady power means that we now have enough, we have a redundancy, we can do maintenance without shutting down. Uninterrupted power will depend on how you and I manage and use what we have. So this requires us to do so many things: stabilize liquidity, meter, solve tariff issues, and so on and so on. It's a journey, but every day the assurance I can give you and I can give Nigerians is that your experience will get better. So if you go to places like Okitipupa, there are communities, about 36 communities, that haven't had power in about 2 years. About 16 of them now have power. We're still working to resolve the remaining with the state. If you go to Magburu, there are communities that haven't had power for 10 years. They now have power. Their neighbors in Muwe and Ibafo are going to get power before the year is over. Some of these communities that you talk about, that I spoke about, Kija, have also been waiting. So we are reaching people slowly but surely. We're working with the traders in area in Aba to ensure that about 27,000 traders there. And we've started a program by which each person will have not only dedicated power for production, they will have their own meters. We're doing the same thing with printers in Shomolu in Lagos and with traders in Sabongari Market in Kano. This is being executed through the Rural Electrification Agency. So it's an inch by inch, day by day, mile by mile process. And if you ask Nigerians, some of them will tell you that their experience is better from those who had power 5 hours a day, some are getting 8 hours a day, some don't have. It's still a mixed blessing. We haven't reached everybody. So I was in Asaba last week to switch on an injection substation completed by NDPAC and Benin Disco together to serve about 11 different communities there who used to have only 5 hours power. The Disco was open and honest enough to say, look, we now have more power, but we can't distribute it. Right. So by making this expansion, we can double the power output that we have.
While not taking all the time on power issues, but you can't really talk about redundancies now, can you?
No, not at this time.
Right. And then the other challenge, of course, is what's been seen as the frequent shutdowns. Now, is this a result of not enough capacity in this industry? Because these disruptions happen quite frequently.
No. Some of the shutdowns, they've come from different reasons. I don't want to sit here and say shutdown is good, but in a way, it just means that our equipment is now working. And it's like having what's it called now? A surge protector in your home that doesn't work. So sometimes we have sudden power outages in some generating plants. They trip off. Just like your generator at home can trip off. Now, it disturbs the balance of the grid. And the mechanism for safety is that the grid either sometimes partially shuts down or sometimes totally shuts down because something unusual has happened. So that's why I said the positive side is that the system is reacting and then we have to restart. And this is also partly because there is a quantum of energy that must be kept to balance the grid when those outages are out occur. It's called a spinning reserve that helps you keep the balance. But it has to be paid for. Now, there are disputes within the operators about how much that, because it's like emergency reserve, but you must keep it there. Now, currently there is none because regulations haven't been completed to the best of my recollection to agree this. But slowly, the number of outages will reduce. And don't also forget that we're just coming out of the rainy season. Sometimes some of these outages do not happen from the power station. They happen from the distribution station where there has been a storm. And sometimes things trip or they switch off, sometimes just for safety. And we've seen this across the world where hurricanes and all of that. The important thing is to go back, put them back on, ensure that it is safe to use before the lines are energized again. This is part of the journey that I dare say we must undertake, but I have clarity that day by day it will get better.
And also dealing with industry issues. For instance, you talk about the disputes over payments, and even you have that even with the bulk trader and the discos, and you're committing funds to it, but it said that that's not even going to take care of the debts.
No, can you say that again?
The issues between the bulk traders and the Gencos.
Okay, now there are different contracts in this industry. The contract between the disco and the bulk trader is a different contract from the contract between the bulk trader and the Gencos. The bulk trader buys power and then sells it or hands it over to the disco to say, go and retail it under a vesting contract and bring back my money. The intention is that the disco's margin is usually about 25% of the total volume, and they should return the bulk amount and some profit. But it turns out that that hasn't happened for many reasons. Tariffs were changed prior to the 2015 election. When it became an election issue, it was reversed. It had created some uncertainty, debts had accrued, and so on and so forth. These are all legacy problems that will be solved as we go on. Then there's a different relationship between the Gencos and the disco and the bulk trader, because they sign bulk trading, bulk buying PPAs with the Gencos. The Gencos, most of them depend on gas plants to produce power, so they also pay for gas. The gas companies also invest and borrow money from banks. So if you fail to settle any part of the value chain, you run the risk of creating a systemic liquidity crisis. So, but that doesn't concern the public. Those are the technical behind the scene issues. We're managing them as best we can, and that is why you see now many more people are beginning to invest in generating power. All of the plants that I told you are going to come is because confidence has returned, and they see that there's a plan, there's a commitment by this government to pay for power that it has. Just for members of the public to know, and those who are proposing more power plants, there is no obligation to sell power only to the bulk trader. The law doesn't make that obligation. So power can be sold directly to eligible bulk consumers, like government, state governments, institutions, hotels, and all of that. The law doesn't stop you from selling power directly to those kind of people. And power can also be sold to under mini-grid arrangements and distributed and licensed.
What are you thinking in terms of green alternatives?
Mr. Stoba, is there a green alternative really and truly?
Well, shouldn't there be?
The body of science that is out there, I know what you mean, but I'm just pulling your feet. Renewables and cleaner energy have been the story of human civilization. I've had cause to discuss this. Initially, the original source of energy for the human being was wood, until we stumbled on coal. And the burning coefficient, the strength, and the energy productivity of coal clearly became more reliable than wood, and that's what has saved most of the forest today. And you will see that as gas came, petrochemicals, hydrocarbons, we left coal and moved to oils and gas, and now we are looking for solar, wind, and all of that. So you will see that the story of human civilization really is a story of looking for more efficient forms of energy. But this is perhaps the first time that it is being done in order to decarbonize the world. Right. So it is now called green. Yeah. But when you look at solar, there's nothing green about it, because the process of making the solar panels is from mining silica, and that is not environmentally friendly at all. It is the end product that is green. The production process, if you look at dams, hydro dams, they have sometimes, and they have proven history, not sometimes, proven history of displacement and all of that. Of course, the energy they produce ultimately is clean and green.
All right. Well, there are so many issues with this, but you still have other sectors you superintend of. But just before we leave the power issue, Nigerians were celebrating, the resuscitation of the Mambila Hydro project. And again, you think that people are expecting too much too soon that's going to come out of that? And everyone is saying, well, this has started again, and, are we being too optimistic?
No, I don't think so. I think when you look at a project that everybody has heard about, the records I met shows that Mambila was in conception since 1972. I was 9 then. Now I'm 54. And I think that to the extent that the Buhari administration has not only revived the project, it has for the first time issued a Federal Executive Council approval. That's the first Federal Executive Council approval for the project. And the government has then from there signed on an EPC contract. So two major things have happened that didn't happen before. Now, just this afternoon, I signed a letter to the Honorable Minister for Finance, sending her all the documents so that she can start the financing negotiations. So I don't think that we're being overly expectant. Once we have the financing in place, this is a 5.5 max 6-year project, and once we break ground, we're good to go. The country is expectant, not just for the power itself. On a daily basis, we're receiving letters, insurance companies, insurance brokers, logistics companies, security companies. Everybody wants to play in this project. And why not? And this is what the economic program of the country really is about. Some see only power. We see an economic empowerment that includes people from logistics to construction to feeding to insurance and so on and so forth, to agriculture, the irrigation capacity that will be delivered when all of this comes through. So we see a new beginning really, not only for Taraba, the northeast, but also for Nigeria by this project standing on its own.
All right. we wish we would do all of this on power, but again, people are looking at roads as well, and that is also a huge, a massive challenge for you. The state of Nigerian roads. And people are saying every time we hear of huge amounts of money committed to either construction or rehabilitation of roads, yet it would seem as if these are just mere drops.
When did we commit huge amounts to roads?
All
when
governments.
Last?
All governments.
No, that's not correct, sir. That's not correct, sir.
It got to a time in this country.
Sir, when I became minister, the 2015 budget for roads in Nigeria was 18 billion naira for the whole of Nigeria's roads. And how much was released? 9 billion naira. This is the first time in a long time, and I'm not saying in forever, but this is the first time in a long time.
So we can safely say that all that was being talked about was never committed.
No, listen. I mean, it's not safely saying so. It's first to look at the budget of the country for the last 6 years before 2015. How much did we commit to capital expenditure? Let's start from there. How much did we commit to capital expenditure? There was no time we committed more than 15% in every year's budget to capital expenditure. That's not what I say. That's what the records show. And did we fund that 15%? Clearly not. You and I are living witnesses, and if you bring out the files, many people have come to discuss some of these things here, you will find them in your files, that even the 15% was not funded. So this is the first time that under the 2016 budget, that 1.3 trillion naira was spent on capital projects in Nigeria in a long time. In a long time. Out of that, I think that the amount that went to roads in my ministry was about 200 and something billion. And what did they go to do? They went to pay old and inherited debts by contractors who had not been paid for 3-4 years, who had stopped work, who had laid off workers. That was the recipe for the recession we subsequently entered. Production stopped. So now that economy is turning around slowly, out of recession, consolidating in third quarter, you can't divert it from the spending on infrastructure. Contractors are back to work. But whether you like it or not, the federal roads that federal government has superintending authority over through my ministry are not 5-kilometer roads. They are usually 120, 250, 360-kilometer roads. You don't build those roads in 1 year or 2 years, even when we have 5 contractors on them. A road like the Kano-Maiduguri has 560 kilometers. There are 5 different contractors on it. So they have to acquire materials, sand, chippings, aggregates, rocks, and those things take man-hours on a day-by-day basis, working 24 hours to even extract, not to talk of transport to site. Then they have to be prepared, and then they have to be moved to site for use. So man-hour by man-hour, we will get there.
There are certain routes easily people would refer to, and basically one of them would be Ilorin, Jabba, Mokwa, and reference to this road, this is recurring. It's almost, while, in fairness, while they're not putting any blame at the doorstep of this administration, Nigerians are saying, look, how quickly can we get these roads done? So many of them, Ilorin, Jabba, Mokwa, Oyo, Ogumosho, even the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. There are so many issues.
Okay,
that
very
have been raised
quickly, let me address Ilorin, Jabba, Mokwa. Ilorin, Jabba, Mokwa was unmotorable when I was appointed minister. The contractor had a contract for 4 billion naira for the Ilorin, Jabba section. They paid him, I think, 250 million naira 3 years before I took office, and that was the last payment he got. He went back to site on my word of honor that he will get paid. I went to that road. It was the first road I actually visited, and I saw people who had been on that road for 4 days. That is not the story today anymore. Ilorin to Jabba is now motorable. Of course, we have suffered some reverses in the good side before that, when the construction was going on. Of course, during the rainy season last year, we lost part of the road to a heavy rainfall at Tatabu Junction. The contractor is back at work. He has provided an alternative, and he says that by the end of this year, he will complete a new bridge and motorability should return to that place. That road is part of the A1 that goes all the way to Ilela in Sokoto and through, I believe, Kotangora. It tails back to Oyo Ogbomosho that you are talking about, and our contractor is on site and the Oyo Ogbomosho new bypass that takes traffic out of the city. So any right-thinking and fair-minded person will tell you that a lot of work has been done. They have gone to inspect, and that is the road that then leads you to the Lagos-Ibadan road, which is the origin of the A1 from the port that ends in Sokoto. So work is going on there. We are constrained by the funds that we have, and you hear every time my colleague, the Honorable Minister for Finance, saying that there is not enough money to fund the whole budget. And she goes to borrow. When she borrows, they say she's borrowing too much. The same people who say she's borrowing say the road is not good. What do we do? We're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't. She has just come back from a road show, and hopefully when we get some more money, we will be able to accelerate the pace of work there. We've lost time, of course, during the rainy season, but we also now have the Sukuk, which is 100 billion, and this is the first time in recent memory that the federal government of Nigeria is going to dedicate 100 billion naira in 1 quarter. It didn't happen even for a whole year in many years, in 1 quarter, to funding roads alone. Now, what is holding up disbursement is the conditions for the Sukuk. The trustees have to sign off, milestones have to be agreed, and all of that. But in the event, hopefully before the end of this month, the contractors should get their money. That money will fund 25 major roads that cover the A1 to A4. So the Jabba road is part of the road that will benefit from it. The A2 will benefit. The Bini, Okene, Lokoja road will benefit from it. The A3 will benefit from it. The Enugu Port Harcourt will benefit from it. So will be the A4, the Calabar to Makurdi, and Onitsha, Enugu, and the 25 roads. The Kanu Western Bypass also will benefit from it, where we have a bridge that has been completed and sections of the road to finish.
And of course, recently we recall the experience on, we're thinking of what happened recently to traffic on the road leading to Abuja, Mina.
Suleja Mina Road, that is one of the roads that would also benefit. That is one of the roads that there are 25 of them. I can't remember all of them.
Right, there's so many of them that we look
from the top of my head, but those I can remember are the ones that I can talk to. As I say to people, even after a while, when you overload the computer, it tells you to upgrade memory.
At a point in time, concerns were being raised about a proposed tolling. Yeah. What do you say about that?
Oh, tolling will happen inevitably. We have proposals in a new law, but we don't need a new law to toll.
Minister, from past experiences, you think this is something that should be reintroduced?
Without a doubt. You see, all you need to do is to look at the quality of our roads before we scrap the toll plazas and the quality of our roads when we scrap them. No matter how inefficient you think those toll collections and toll managements were, some part of the money ultimately came back to the road somehow.
Accountability issues.
So, yes, accountability issues now, we have answers for that. We are living in a digital and technological age. So, there are much more upgraded, operated means of finding out how many cars pass through how many places, and you can then edit, audit, and verify. So, and you reduce cash. So we are a country that is carrying significantly less cash than we used to carry in those days when we ran those toll plazas. Almost everybody that you know, many out of every 10 now have one form of card or the other, were using ATMs. There were no ATMs when we canceled those tolls. So our financial lifestyles have varied and changed to respond to technology, and we must then integrate that technology into what we want to do. We now have an interbank settlement system, so I don't see how that cannot be built in as part of the back end to settle and audit claims and uses and pay off everybody. People now pay electricity bills and so on from their phones. I don't see why we can't integrate that into a modern toll plaza. All you need is the software that makes this operable and interconnected, and that's what we're working on.
How much have you been able to resolve issues with states that have undertaken to fix federal roads within their domain, and they complain that getting reimbursed from the federal government is like the proverbial camel passing through the eye of the needle?
Well, substantially, in the Ministry of Power Works and Housing, all of the people who have provided the documentation that we require, myself and some of my colleagues in a committee that I chaired that was created by Mr. President, who made a commitment to pay as much of the debts as our resources can afford. We've completed our work, we've gone around, we've broken ourselves into teams, going from zone to zone and inspecting, and we filed a report which Council has adopted. The work now that is left is Treasury work, which is now Ministry of Finance's responsibility. But she's taking them along with other debts, because there's so many other debts that haven't been accounted for in the past. We're just cleaning the Augean table, trying to reset the economic clock of this country, make sure that we account for all her debts, as we also will account for all our assets. And when you put Nigeria's debts against our assets, the debts are such an insignificant part of the assets that this country really has. So in terms of tomorrow and viability and futures, is a very, very viable and strong going concern. But all of this paperwork, data collection, records of the past, cleaning up, closing books have to be done. And that is what this president is doing.
Well, Minister, we can't let you go without bringing up this other very critical issue to do with housing. There doesn't seem to be an agreement on what actually is the housing deficit in this country. The only thing we agreed on is that there is a huge demand, a massive demand for housing.
Interesting. Now, let me put it this way. It's difficult to have an agreement on an unknown number. Unfortunately, our last population census was disputed. And that is the basis of planning. And that is why voices like mine were very, very audible when we were doing a population census. And they will remain audible anytime we are doing data gathering. Data is the new global currency. It's not naira and dollar. Those who collect accurate data will lead the world. And we must stop playing games anytime it comes to collecting data. If we want to do a census, people should stay where they normally, ordinarily reside, not in the town or the state where they come from. Because it is that census that will tell us where we need to put houses, where we need to put power, and how much power we need to put, where we need to put water, and where we need to even deploy security, so that we know really how many people need to be protected, need to be served, where healthcare needs to be. So, that said, the basis of our housing policy is not different from many countries. Affordability, that's the basis. But what is the program? Now, before I tell you the program that we are dealing with, there are empty houses in almost, if not all states in Nigeria. There are empty houses. Those houses are there because people either don't like them, because they didn't consult them when they were building them, or either people like them or they can't afford them because they were not built for them. I went to inspect a housing estate from the previous administration recently that was supposed to deliver 1 million housing units over some time, doing 100,000 units per year, and it had done only about 19 blocks. But about 10 or 9 billion had been paid. And we can't account for that. So we are investigating what happened. Now, so what we must do is develop a housing program. It is a housing program that enables us respond to the people's needs. How do you develop a program? You must first consult with the off-taker, the end user. What do you want? We have done that. That was the first thing we did when I assumed office. The whole of 2016, we were going from state to state. We were consulting with stakeholders. We held summits. We spoke with developers. And they told us that averagely, Nigerians are fine with 1, 2, and 3 bedroom flats, 3 bedroom housing units. But they are very, very, very critical about how you build them. In the northern part of the country, they want bungalows and they want courtyards. So you must build for their sensitivity, for their climate, for their culture, and for the land use that they have. In the south, the same 1, 2, 3 bedrooms will fly, but they will fly in blocks of flats. The land use is more restricted, and therefore you have to stack and go up. Having developed all of this, we now apply to state governors, give us land, because if we bought land, the cost will pass on to the end user. So we wanted land free from the states. 33 states have given us land.
Right.
So we are building in 33 states as I speak to you. We are roofing in some, we are fitting in some, we are just out of foundation in some, and we want to use this to prove that the concept works.
Okay. A quick one here, which might not just be fair, but anyhow, how many housing units can you safely say this government will deliver in the next 1 year? Have a target in mind?
No, I can't give you that answer now. I'm telling you that we are designing a product. If you speak to product developers, if you speak to inventors, they will tell you that until the concept is proven, they can't automate.
So in that case, we can't have a timeline, for instance. And
No, until we finish.
Okay.
Because when we finish, we now have to cost infrastructure. This thing is not fast food. It's real, very rigorous work. You see, when you go to other countries and you see, you go to counties where they build the same type of houses, it didn't happen because somebody just made a pronouncement. The United Kingdom has made pronouncement about housing targets. They haven't met them recently. Malaysia has made theirs. They haven't met them. These things are not easy, and I believe that we can solve this problem if we do the hard work. And I am not going to say what people perhaps would just like to be said for the purpose of it. I take what I say seriously, and I believe that this can be done, and we intend to do it.
Finally, Minister, quickly, 2018 estimates, budgets, more than 555 billion. That's what's going to your ministry. Some would say, you think that amount can go to really fix the huge issues that are facing power, works, and housing?
I think that question is extremely premature. Let the budget be passed first, then I will come back and come and answer.
All right. We just wondered that...
What goes in is not what comes out. So let us wait until the budget is passed, is signed into law.
Are you hoping by any chance that
saying
what goes
nothing.
in might come back
I'm saying
more?
nothing. Let us go in. And when the budget is signed into law, I'll come and answer that question.
All right, Minister, we'll look forward to you coming at that time. But on a final note, on a party note, you were governor of Lagos State, two-term governor of Lagos State, and so many things were said about you. And you also at that time talked about how you thought this country could be run properly. You got in, you became Minister of Power, most importantly, especially power. And so people recall that, well, you used to talk a lot about how to fix the power situation. Did anything change when you now became an insider as from when you were looking at it as governor of Lagos State?
I think my answer to those who ask if anything changed is, can you really compare what you did at two years with what you did in 8 years? You are comparing apples and oranges. Nothing has changed. I'm working as hard as I've always worked. And go back to what the public was saying about me in my first 2 years as governor. And you will find out that they are even perhaps more generous now in my first 2 years as minister. Now there is a conception period in everything, even life. And even when a child is born, you can't expect a 2 or 3 year old child to grow a mustache. So there's a planning period here. I understand the expectation. I understand it. But even with all of the resources, right, we can't even build a road in one night.
All right.
It takes time.
Okay.
And you see, and I'm going to say this. I think there's one area around which all of us can easily unite. It's around our football.
Okay.
Okay? Now, everybody likes what is happening in the Super Eagles now. We've qualified with 1 game to go. We've tested our strength against a former world champion. Well, struggling as they are, but it's good soundbite for us. But did we get here in 1 day? Certainly not.
Right.
That team was constituted about 2 years ago. I think a few months ago, that team lost to South Africa and we were all saying, oh, this is the end. They got their groove back.
Okay.
They found momentum. They have momentum now.
So
this government is a team. People who have never worked together in the federal government, coming from different parts of the world, different parts of the country. There is a time that they require to gel.
Okay.
I think that gelling period has substantially taken place. This team has momentum now, and you will see that momentum in the trends in the economy, the exchange rate, the interest rate, inflation rate, the ease of doing business, the production in electricity, the GDP growth. The results will come.
All right.
And people should be patient.
Okay. Well, Babatunde Raji Fashola, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Minister of Power, Works and Housing, it's been interesting talking to you. Thank you for coming on One on One.
Thank you for having me.
We'll ask you to come again, hopefully.
I'll be back.
All right. And that's our program. Thank you for watching. Next week, we'll be back with One on One. I am Cyril Stoba. Bye for now.
No, sir.
Why didn't you go during this convention? What party do you support?
I am a neutral.
Okay, that means you are a COA.
I think I'm just all for good government.
Okay, all right then. All right. So talk to my friend Valentine. What do you do for a living?
I'm an event planner, actually.
Oh, okay. So you should.